Let's get a whole line of U.S. Army soldiers saying, I want, like Jimmy Massey's saying, he's an ex-U.S. Marine, drill instructor, recruiter, he recruited like 68 Marines. He says, man, prosecute me. Prosecute me for war criminals, would you please? Please, quit giving me your prescription medications, quit fucking with my head and prosecute me. You can't, can you? Because you know if you prosecute me, you're guilty. It's a rough cycle he's trying to trap him in. We got to get the resistance up here. We got to get the depleted uranium people. We got to get the 9/11 people. And we just have to get our straight constitutionalists. This is Jazz Funeral for Democracy. It's a whole nother activity we do where we rip the Constitution up and say, you know what, Constitution's dead in America. Constitution died in that first election when Bush stole it. It died. That's been the one last part of the experiment, is the vote. Or the jury trial. We have a jury trial and we have the vote. They say we're a democracy because of it. Well, we ain't voting anymore, and you know our jury system is trashed. It puts black people, brown people in jail. That's what that's for. That system is built to enslave black and brown people. If you go into any prison damn near in the United States, and I've been in them for the stuff I do, I run into black and brown people. I was in the RNC, I got arrested. I was the first jury trial. They dismissed it. I basically liberated the 1,800 other people that got incarcerated. But when I went into the tombs, I was the only white dude in there. And Bob Dylan sang about the tombs back in the 60s. Don't want to get thrown in the tombs. Same system 40 years later. I'm in there. They're feeding the black population garbage. And they're serving them milk, and everybody knows the black culture, black population, lactose intolerant, shouldn't be drinking milk. And then if you listen to Loren Murray, they're sending in the radioactive milk from the dairy stuff. So there is you talk about genocide. Genocide is at home. Genocide's right there, it's happening. And we've been genociding since the beginning of the US. So the Jazz Funeral for Democracy, we were down in New Orleans, and what we were doing, we held a second line, because that's traditional in New Orleans. If you ever heard of a second line, you get the drummers and the bands and the trombones, trumpets, wooden carriage with the horses and the wooden coffin. That's how they put their musicians to rest in New Orleans. Well, that's the way they did. And this is in January 20th, 2005, inauguration day of the second stolen election. And so we're doing a second line. We go to Lake Pontchartrain. We rip the Constitution up. We throw it in there. There had never been a there had never been a peace protest in New Orleans. That's hard to believe, isn't it? But it's because the Deep South has been fighting for equality and social justice and civil rights for long. They laugh at the peace movement. You're a joke. You come over here and take care of your own people. I mean, it's not that they don't care about anybody else, but it's like, you're going to tell me this is peaceful? We're having a debate. We got to get to justice before we can get to peace down there right now. So you can see this happening all along. It's a very inherent racist program we develop in the United States. The textbooks teach us at a very young age, very Straussian, that we're better than everybody else. And because we have money, we're even better. So that's my dilemma. I grew up very poor. I was a poor white kid in the Silicon Valley, which is a huge, huge shock. Because you got kids coming into your house going, where's the swimming pool? Where's the workout bench? Where's the video games? Where's the computer? Where's the other bathroom? Now we only have one bathroom. You're poor. Okay, so we move on. We grow up. We realize the poor people in America aren't in the Silicon Valley no matter how poor I was. There are places in Florida, right outside of Tallahassee, that have no running water or electricity. They're black communities. You dig? So that's all had, and we have to go on record about all of it. We have to go on record about the uranium. We have to go on record about the 9/11. We have to go on record about the resistance. We have to go on record about the racism, the genocide, the environmental racism, the environmental. We have to go on record. We have to go on record all the time. We have to go on record every day. We have to go on record for the rest of our life. I've been doing this since I moved out of there in 2003. But you'll find me here at the Trojan Horses and Nuclear War. Trojan Horses and Nuclear War is October 2003. I got out of the military in September 2003. I got out saying, the only thing I can do is go march every day with new information. I'm the same person. People don't change. George Bush is not going to change. I haven't changed. I just have new information. We got to get new information to these minds. What they're doing to us is they're mining old information for new evidence. They're taking outdated information from years ago and using that as current evidence on us. We need new information. It's the only way we're going to develop critical thinking and intelligence over the issues. I see a question over there.
First of all, I just want to say
Dig it, yeah. So Blackwater is basically, I firmly believe that some of these people might have read Mill's Utopia. And in Mill's Utopia, the guy writes that there's no way you're going to get away without at least having a mercenary squad. He writes that in Utopia. He says, we'll pay them, though, so we won't be the bad guys. So Blackwater arrives in New Orleans before I'm there, and I'm there. So I leave Camp Casey on the last day. Camp Casey ended at the end of August. I was there from the beginning to the end of that with Cindy Sheehan. She's a good friend of mine. And we took all the food that people had been sending from the U.S. down to Camp Casey. We got it in a 66 Gillig bus, and we drove into New Orleans from Texas. Tons of food. People were sending food from all over the place. So I started the first functional supply line. I'm an ex-U.S. Army drill sergeant, former combat airborne medic. I opened up a supply line because that's what you do on a battlefield. You open up a supply line, get food to the people. I got food into Algiers Point. Malik Rahim, who's a former Black Panther down there with Common Ground. I got in there. I was in there by September 6th into Algiers Point. Algiers Point did not flood. There was no flood on Algiers Point. Lake Pontchartrain goes between Orleans Parish of New Orleans, but Algiers Point is considered in Orleans Parish, but it isn't inside the flood zone, so it didn't flood. It was outside of the lake. It actually locks right up next to Gretna, the bridge where they were holding black people at gunpoint. Well, what was going on there was it literally was an assault on New Orleans. It was an attack. The night I moved in there on September 6th, the first Cav was sitting there with an M16 in my face while I was on the bus, the first Cav. And I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, if this was a Louisiana National Guard soldier, he would not have that gun in my face. He held the gun to Ralph McAtee. Ralph McAtee comes from Summertown, Tennessee, which is where the farm is. The farm comes out of Stephen Gaskin's community. It's a communal living system. But they have basically a relief group who does relief work all over the world, Central America mostly. So they showed up in New Orleans. They're kind of rowdy like we are. They showed up. They had a bus, too. I said, all right, let's get into Algiers Point. He was on bus day that day. He drove. The gun's in his face, and the guy's going, why'd you hijack the bus? He's going, I didn't hijack anything, man. This is my razor shaver thing. That's how I charge my razor. How do you turn the bus on and off? He turns it on and off. See, he'd been in combat zones in Central America. He knew how to behave. You see, one wrong clack, he's dead. He's fucking dead. One wrong word right then in New Orleans that day, and he's dead. Because this guy had just come from Baghdad. He was treating us like we were Iraqis in New Orleans 6 days after the hurricane hit. You dig? And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, man, I'm the next drill sergeant. I'm going to lock this guy up. And I'm thinking, no, I just ducked down in the thing and just sat in the back. Because that's what's going on. He's not going to pull. I'm not pulling rank on anybody with an M16 who's got trigger-happy thing, Pavlov and all that. Well, Ralph McAtee handled it, and we made it in there. We made it in there by 6. It was a 6 o'clock curfew. These are grown adults. They got a curfew on them, and there's no flooding. You see, there was a forced evacuation on. They were trying to get everybody out of New Orleans. Why? Well, they want any more black people there, and they want to turn it into riverboat gambling. Okay. So they want everybody out of there. As we're leaving that night, Malik Rahim asked me, he said, stay here tonight, man. I said, no. Not with those guys out there. But his problem was he was having a race war going on. Right around the corner, the rebel flag's flying, and they want to kill all the black people. I'm like, I wish I could stay to help you, man, but I got to get out of here because those guys are not, those guys are supposed to be my friends, and they're not. So I don't have any friends down here. I left. On my way out, it's dark, 7 o'clock. It's September of 2005. There is convoys of U.S. military vehicles going into New Orleans under the cover of night. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that is a military tactic to surround your enemy, starve them out, and then move in. And that's what they were doing in New Orleans. So what they realized was that it didn't look good to do that with an offensive body posture, which is when you're running around dressed up like a tree pretending you're angry, it's not the right posture to pretend you're doing relief work in. So, and the National Guard of Louisiana is just totally overextended in Iraq right now, and they're not coming home, and so we got a situation. So they bring in Blackwater. They bring them under the auspices and the guise of corporatism to protect corporate interests. So that's why they were there. They weren't there to do any humanitarian work. They weren't handing out any bottles of water. They weren't feeding anybody. They would stand guard. When we drove into New Orleans, they would just be dressed in full black shirts, full black, it's like Delta Force uniforms, standing there in front of these buildings that were just ugly, rotten, and stinky. And it wasn't necessarily that there was anything in there to protect. You see, this is imagery. You as a society need to start getting used to having people on the corners with guns. And when I went to Mexico City in 1986, that's what I saw. 1986, I went down there. I said, man, these guys are on the corners with automatic weapons. Well, we're going there in the U.S. We went there in New Orleans. Remember what Tarpley said. They're always running drills, and then they go live. The deal is that the drill isn't going to be a guy dressed up like a tree running around like he's angry. The drill is going to be people who look more like security than they do like soldiers. So that's important. It's important because we have to go on record. I've been on record. When you go to my webpage, you'll see depleted uranium, Katrina, Camp Casey, because that's all I do. This is all I do. And most of the time, I don't have a tie on. Most of the time, I'm out in the streets flipping somebody off, telling some cop they're a Nazi. Because that's the situation and the crisis we're in. My website is DennisKyne.com. So my last name's Kyne, Dennis Kyne. And it's important because what you'll find is if you realize, like Dr. Joe's telling me last night, there's a sense of urgency here. Because inherently, it's kind of because, let's assume I'm giving you something. I'm going to give you $1. I'm going to give you $1 every day. And keep coming to me like that rat with the cheese in R.E. Skinner's study. And come to me one day and you say, come for my $1. I go, I don't got $1 for you. That's over. I'm all done. Who's the asshole then? Me. I become the asshole. If we do not reverse this trend, they're going to tell us it's our own fault. They're going to tell us because we don't care. They're just, but you know it isn't that. You know you do care. You just don't know if you care about your kid and you got to feed him more than you care about fighting some dirty bastard. They're making you pick your priorities all the time. And we can't pick the one that's paramount to the big picture most of the time because most of us I'm guilty of not being able to see beyond the end of my nose sometimes. You know, I'm guilty of not being focused on the critical issue. I have to stop and listen to the quiet time in my brain and go, I'm not really upset that Israel is Israel. I'm a little upset that they're occupying, but I'm not upset because it's Israel. I'm not upset because it's Shia or Sunni. I'm not upset because I'm American or you're this. I'm upset because we're not getting any of the information. And if we just had the truth, we could handle it. There's absolutely no reason in my state of mind, as naive as I've been, as naive as I'm not, and everything I don't know, that I couldn't handle it if you just said, look, we're going to go over there and we're going to wipe Islam out. You know why I can handle it? Because I know that's what you're doing. Right. So now we start from this struggle of getting somebody to tell us the truth. That's a struggle that, however that got created, is fascinating to me. But if we can't get to the truth, then we're not going to get anywhere. And that's the important part for me today to convey, and spiritually, because I don't go to church. I don't think church is the place we should congregate. I think we've been talked into, and when I say congregate for your spiritual belief, you can congregate anywhere you want to for that. But when it comes time to get the information, when we go in there for the love and kindness in these institutions of religion, we're not getting the truth. And I'm not talking about the truth that comes from your spirit and your God. I'm talking about there are preachers and pastors in the United States who are talking about in the beginning of this war that George Bush is moving too slow. We got to get over there and start killing everybody. George Bush is moving too slow. He's not a good Christian. These people are preaching to, we have mega churches in the U.S. where 5, 6, 10,000 people congregate and they hear that stuff. They hear that. They hear, oh, this George Bush, what's taking him so long?
Whatever happened to thou shalt not kill?
Dig it. Whatever happened to love your enemy for whatever reason. It's conceptually, and I'm never denouncing where and why we get together, but I am questioning what we get when we get there. What do we get? See, my father happened, and that's part of my subculture, and that's one of the things, in the same presentation maybe we lean on a little bit, is addressing our subcultures. I come from a Jesuit tradition with Irish cellular memory, all kinds of stuff that I have to look at. I have to find out, where does my belief system derive from? My belief system in religion comes from a guy who was basically assaulted by priests when he went to school every day in the parochial system. Dig it. However it worked, it fucked him up so badly that I'm a recipient of it. I got it. I got the virus. I can't go to church. no matter what. That's Pavlov again. It's intermittent reinforcement too, because I did go to church a couple times and I went, I don't understand. I didn't understand, but left. And intermittent reinforcement is the most deadly psychological thing going on. And if you don't understand it, I'll give it to you real briefly. Let's use gambling as the example. If you sat down at the poker table and you won every single hand, you would go crazy. So you don't win every single hand. You only win one every 8. That's intermittent reinforcement. That's why you play the other 7. You play the other 7 and lose all your money so you'll possibly win the 8th. And you keep going for the 8, then it absolutely shifts into R.E. Skinner on you. And there's no cheese on round 8. And all of a sudden you're playing 16 rounds, you're broke, your family's broke, and you're living in la-la land. And you don't even realize psychologically where the dings came from. And that's, so all of us have to be like decolonizing our mind regularly, like detoxing and cleansing this part just as much as this part. Getting rid of some of these thoughts, man. Training and programming our brain not to hate, not to kill, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that's part of our obligation as humans. And it's the only reason I can say that is because I worked so hard. 15 years I worked so hard under a different set and a different book of information. And I'm working just as hard with a different book of information. And that's the game. The game isn't that we're bad or good. We're working in different definitions of right. Those guys on Capitol Hill think they are right. They swear on the Bible they are right. They tell their family, their children, and their constituents they are right. And we're sitting in this room and we are saying we are right. Let's forget that now. Let's just forget that and let's focus on, as Tarpley's saying and Peter Dale Scott is saying, on strategies. Let's talk about some strategies and let's focus on being effective. Let's make sure your brother knows 9/11 has some situations. Let's let him know that there are many, many concerned Christians in the United States that think 9/11 is a scam. Joyce Riley. Many, many concerned Christians don't think that our president is a Christian. Why is that?
He's a Satanist. He's part of the Skull and Bone Society, carrying Kennedy and all that.
That's right. So for me, that's the basis of everything I'm trying to expound on today, because the topic of my breakout group was, you know, my military service and my activism. But if you were in the other room, you got my service. If you didn't get it, just type in my name on the inline. You'll see it all. It's ridiculous. It would be so self-aggrandizing for me to pontificate on it too much. But I was nominated to go to West Point from active duty. You know, I have every single thing. I have accolades and letters and all kinds of stuff. And really, what you realize is that's how they get you. They get you because you get to stand out in front of everybody and, oh, look, it's me. I got another award. And the awards don't mean anything. Yeah, pat you on the head. It's gross. It's gross and it's childish. And like I'm saying in the other room, I didn't have cognitive dissonance. I was intelligent. I had a brain, but I didn't know that what we were doing, I was a great soldier, but I wasn't doing anything great. I was perfect. Looked good, looked sharp, always performed, but when you ask yourself, am I on the right side, even though both of them are considered, am I on the right side, or am I just telling the story